Frid och shalom vänner, härligt att stå för Israel idag den 14 maj. Uppdatering, Israels självständighetsdag. Idag klockan 18 på Gustav Adolfs torg. Så ska vi ner och jag ska försöka filma så mycket det går i alla fall. Så ni får ut det på YouTube sen. Sen blir det, jag vet inte vilka som kommer dit eller vad det kommer att handla om egentligen. Men vi ska dit i alla fall. Har du tid så Göteborg, Gustav Adolfs torg klockan 18.00 imorgon. Vi tar och börjar med lite Guds ord här. Ett rent samvete är ju härligt att ha. Apostlarna 24:16. Därför strävar jag alltid efter att ha ett gott samvete inför Gud och människor, står det där. Många ser samvetet som en dörr eller en kanal eller ett fönster mellan anden och själen. Är det stängt där eller om fönstret är smutsigt så kan inte ljuset lysa från anden in och beröra vår själ, billigt talat. Så Gud använder alltså vårt eget samvete när han talar till oss genom sin heliga ande som bor i vår ande. Guds befallningar kommer alltså ifrån Guds sons eget liv i oss. Det står ju att anden hämtar ifrån Guds son och manifesterar och uppenbarar för oss. Det är att höra Guds röst. Du kan inte skilja på anden och Kristus, min vän, då har du kommit ganska fel. Naturligtvis så vill vi inte lyda. För det är ju köttets natur att inte vilja göra det. Men när Gud får arbeta med oss inifrån och genom vårt samvete, genom tuktan och helgelse, så blir vi mer och mer villiga att lyda honom. Och det är därför det står att nåd och frid förökar sig hos er. Romarbrevet 15:13. Må hoppets Gud uppfylla er med all glädje och frid i tron, så att ni överflödar i hoppet genom den helige andes kraft. Det är Guds nåd alltså. Så Gud talar alltså till oss, och när vi lyder och böjer oss för hans instruktioner som övergår vårt förstånd, kan det ju bara uppfattas av vår tro. Och då påverkar detta vår själ som innehåller följande beståndsdelar då. Vilja, förstånd och känslor. Det är ju vårt hjärta också. Det är alltså samvetets rening som öppnar dörren eller renar ögat eller fönstret så att Guds inspiration till mig genom samvetet blir den nya lag som Paulus kallar för livets andes lag. Så att jag inte drivs genom mitt förstånd längre utan jag drivs av anden som påverkar mitt förstånd igenom samvetet. Romarbrevet 8:1. Och då försvinner något som heter fördömelse som många drabbas av idag. Det finns ingen fördömelse för dem som är i Kristus Jesus. Ty livets andes lag har i Jesus Kristus gjort mig fri från synden och dödens lag. Alltså den här strävan efter att vara duktig och uppnå saker i kristenheten. Det som var omöjligt för lagen, svag som den var genom den syndiga naturen, det gjorde Gud genom att sända sin egen son som syndoffer, han som till det yttre var lik en syndig människa, och i hans kropp fördömde Gud synden. På det sättet skulle lagens krav, alltså det som påverkar vårt samvete genom intuition, uppfyllas i oss som inte lever efter köttet utan efter anden. De som lever efter sin kötsliga natur tänker på det som hör till köttet. Men den som lever efter anden tänker på det som hör till anden. Köttets sinne är död, skilsmässa alltså. Men andens sinne är liv och frid. Därför ska vi ju sträva efter att få andens sinne, eller hur? Så vi får uppleva vila och frid med Gud. Samvetet är alltså själens öga, och Gud ger alltså oss en allt större förmåga att kunna se och skåda Herrens härlighet. Och den som ser honom, han blir utan fördömelse, men full av Guds fruktan. Den som håller sitt öga öppet, han tar sig tillvara för att sätta sitt öga och skåda efter den förbjudna frukten som Eva gjorde. Anden samarbetar alltså med människans samvete och renar vårt samvete och uppenbarar sig för vår själ. Och den sanningen är den som gör oss fria. Johannes 8:31. Jesus sa till de judar som hade satt tro till honom: om ni förblir i mitt ord, pågående form alltså, är ni verkligen mina lärjungar, då ska ni förstå sanningen, och då ska sanningen göra er fria. Det tar alltså tid och är en process, och bli inte förskräckt om det ser ut som om du kör fast på vägen. Jag kan vittna om att det kommer det att göra. Bli inte rädd då, min vän, fortsätt bara. Anden uppenbarar alltså Jesus Kristus för vår själ genom Guds ord. Det är det här ljuset som Bibeln talar om. Efesierbrevet 5:14. Ty allt som uppenbaras är ljus. Och allt som Gud uppenbaras handlar ju om Jesus Kristus förstås. Det är ju inget annat som är värt något. Därför heter det: vakna upp du som sover, alltså öppna dina ögon då och stå upp från de döda, så ska Kristus lysa över dig, eller på din själ med andra ord. Så sann väckelse, det vi längtar efter, det är att människor får ögonen öppnade, och det påverkar samvetet och genom detta också själen. Anden kommer då att upprätta en helt ny standard i oss och i församlingen och överbevisa oss och andra också om synd, om dom och rättfärdighet. Romarbrevet 12:1. Ska vi se hur viktigt det här är för att vi ska kunna se och förstå Guds vilja för våra liv. Och församlingens också givetvis. Så förmanar jag er nu, bröder, vid Guds barmhärtighet, att frambära era kroppar som ett levande och heligt offer som behagar Gud, er andliga gudstjänst. Anpassa er inte, eller forma er inte efter den här världens tankesätt alltså, utan låt er förvandlas genom sinnets förnyelse, alltså det vi har talat om, så att ni kan pröva vad som är Guds vilja, vad som är gott, fullkomligt och vad som behagar honom. Ty i kraft av den nåd som jag har fått, så säger jag till var och en av er: ha inte höga tankar om er själva än ni bör ha, utan tänk förståndigt efter det mått av tro som Gud har tilldelat var och en. Att kunna urskilja Guds vilja för våra liv kommer alltså att göras med det mått av tro som Gud har tilldelat dig. Det är alltså genom tron som man också renar våra hjärtan i den processen som vi nyss har förklarat här, inifrån och ut, som leder till vår befrielse och ett helande av vårt innersta. Gud kommer alltså att föra in olika saker för att låta hans fiende, köttet alltså, förlora sin kraft. Och det är väl det enda sättet som man kan få vår uppmärksamhet på, för att han ska kunna öppna våra ögon så att vi får se ljuset. Efesierbrevet 5:14. Det här skulle ju innebära att det som ser så svårt ut för oss kan vara en jättestor välsignelse i Guds ögon. Det är Jesus Kristus uppenbarat för oss genom anden i vår ande och genom samvetet som berör vår själ, så att vi kan göra och drivas på vägen att göra Guds vilja. Och det här är ju som sagt en process alltihop vi talar om här. Hebreerbrevet 4:12. Guds ord är levande och verksamt. Det är skarpare än något tveeggat svärd och tränger igenom. Det fortsätter alltså att tränga igenom. Till slut så skiljer det ande och själ, led och märg. Och det är en domare över hjärtats uppsåt och tankar. Det kommer alltså en kraftig överbevisning, med andra ord. Ett mått av tro. Inget skapat är dolt för honom, utan allt ligger naket och uppenbart för hans ögon. Och inför honom måste vi stå till svars. Han vet nämligen allting om oss. Och det är ju en väldig välsignelse att veta det egentligen. Yttre svårigheter som orsakar att jag vänder mitt öga till Gud för att kunna ta emot nåd till hjälp i rätt tid. Det är så att den Jesus Kristus som har tagit sin boning i oss genom tron, han är egentligen allting vi behöver för att nå vårt mål. Öppna dina ögon för den sanna väckelsen. Den är väldigt personlig och den börjar med dig. Och David utbrister ju i en psalm, ser ni bergen här bakom. Vart ska min hjälp komma? Så tittar han upp mot bergen. Och de här bergen, de ser ju inte ut att kunna rubba sig i första taget. Nej, precis så är Israels Gud. Han är orubblig i sina beslut. Och han kommer att föra både Israel och dig som tror till sitt mål. Gud välsigna er, håll till godo nu med dessa 3 klipp som följer. I Jesu Kristi namn. Amen. Ja, vänner. Babylon har ju varit ett ämne i diskussioner i många år vad det är. Ett kontantlöst system ser vi ju är på gång i alla fall. Och med mera. Och fullständig kaos nere i Mellanöstern. Ja, Andy Wood som är på James Cadys program. Och de diskuterar detta. Och vi kan lyssna och bedöma själva.
So many people talking about it's the United States of America. It means this. It's spiritually this. And there's all kinds of assertions that are made. So man, I got you here. I'm gonna talk about all of this, bro. I think this is great stuff. Can you do us a favor? I know most people that watch me know who you are, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself as we start this off? And then I'm going to get into some questions.
Okay. Well, my name is Dr. Andy Woods, and I pastor a church, as you mentioned before, in Sugar Land, Texas, Sugar Land Bible Church. Sugar Land, 2 words, by the way, is kind of southwest Houston.
Yep.
And there's a big sugar mill there. That's where we get the name Sugar Land, kind of a historic landmark. What else about me? I'm the president of a school, Chafer Theological Seminary. I actually came from Southern California. I grew up in Southern California, but I got to the promised land as fast as I could.
I can't blame you for that.
And we kind of, by then I met my wife, Ann. I have a daughter, Sarah. And we left California to go to Texas about 1999 to get theological education. Ended up at Dallas Seminary, have 2 degrees from there, a THM and a PhD. And yes, I did write my doctoral dissertation.
On Babylon.
And then from there, I got a job at a Bible college. I fell into a pastorate accidentally, if there is such a thing as accidental in Christianity, more providentially. And what happened over the course of time is the church really started to do well. And so I became the full-time pastor of Sugar Land Bible Church. And so that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Okay, so I'm telling you, this is incredible. And we have a great resource, by the way, in Andy. I can tell you this right now. I just love some of the work that Andy's done. You guys just, you have to go get his books. You have to go online, listen to the stuff he does. My favorite show, one of my favorite shows on YouTube is The Pastor's Point of View that he does every Friday morning. I always love it. I don't know if you record it on Fridays. You probably record it a different day and you release it on Fridays, right? Is that what happens?
Yeah, we record on Thursday and then we drop it on Friday.
Yeah, it's a great show. I listen to a lot of those episodes. I think I've binged listened to many of them. They're just really valuable. What I really like about your show is that, yeah, you bring up all the current events. You're talking about all the things that are going on, but there's a lot of evergreen value to what you put, because there's stuff that just, you get a really good, solid biblical education, and it's really, really good to kind of develop that understanding for a lot of people that don't really have it, right? Mm-hmm. It's useful. And then for those of us that are studying Bible prophecy, it's refreshing to take the dog for a walk or to go for a drive or whatever and listen to that. It's great. And I love your format. I love how Jim reads the articles, and then you spend a lot of time expounding upon it, and you guys go back and forth. It's actually a really nice energy between you guys, and I have a lot of fun. I mean, it's just very valuable. So let's get right into this, bro. Let's talk about Babylon. First and foremost, what is Babylon? Because per Revelation, we've been talking about this. A lot of people, one of my favorite pet peeves is everybody says, what about Mystery Babylon? Mm-hmm. Why is that even a mistake?
Well, first of all, just real quick, your sermon today was awesome.
Praise God.
It's like, you connected chapter 18 with the whole book and explained that. You take Babylon for what it says, Babylon, and then you taught the whole chapter verse by verse. And I think if folks would go and watch your sermon from this morning, particularly preachers, they would get a pretty good education on, how to teach, basically. Yeah. And that's basically what you did today.
It's an honor hearing that from you. I can tell you that right now.
Yeah, it was great teaching. But, the reality of the situation, as you know, is Babylon, the word is used 300 times in the Bible. And every single time it's used, it means Babylon. I mean, It refers to the city between the Euphrates and the Tigris. The Hebrews called that area Shinar. The Greeks called it Mesopotamia, Meso, middle, Potamia, rivers is in Potomac, and it's modern-day Iraq. And it's basically where the Tower of Babel once stood. You'll see the reference to Shinar there in, I think, Genesis 11, around verses 1 and 2. And it's the same area where the children of Israel were taken into the 70-year captivity. You'll see a reference to that, Shinar, Daniel chapter 1, verse 2. And Bible prophecy, as you know very well, anticipates that city is going to rise to tremendous importance in the last days. And so when Revelation 17 and 18, and as you well know, it doesn't just start in Revelation 17 and 18. It starts actually in Revelation 14.
That's right. I
think it's about verse 8. That's the first time Babylon is mentioned. And then as you explained this morning, you get to the seventh bowl judgment, and you have the greatest earthquake in human history, and Babylon the Great is destroyed. And then there's a non-chronological parenthetical insertion there explaining Babylon past, present, and future. And as you pointed out, it disrupts the flow of the book. I totally agree with what you said today. 5 non-chronological parenthetical insertions. This is the last one, before it picks up again chronologically in chapter 19, relative to the second advent. So that's what you have going on in Revelation 17 and 18. It's kind of an excursus. I call them lunch breaks. The way I explain it is you're hiking up a mountain, and then you pick a place to have lunch. And usually the place you pick to have lunch is scenic, so you can look backward to where you've been.
Yeah.
And forward to where you're going. And then when lunch is over, you get back on the hiking path and keep moving chronologically. That's what you have going on there in Revelation 17 and 18. It's just a pause to give the Holy Spirit giving to John, more information about Babylon. What exactly just happened in this seventh bowl judgment? And then I totally concur with what you said this morning, that it's the same city in both chapters. Yeah. 17 is more focused on the religious side of the city. Right. 18 is more focused on the commercial side of the city, but it's the exact same city. Chapter 17 gives you a little bit more information on exactly how Babylon is going to fall, where God is going to put into the heart of the beast the desire to destroy the city. And then chapter 18 just sort of picks up on that and gives you more commercial information about the city. And, there's no reason not to take Babylon at face value. Everybody says, well, we rail as dispensationalists against replacement theology.
Oh, yeah.
Where they say, the church is Israel. Well, what's happened is replacement theology mentality. Not that everybody does this as a replacement theologian, but they walk in there in chapter 17 and 18, and they just scratch out the word Babylon and write in Rome or the United States or something. And the truth of the matter is, the word Babylon is a technical word in the Bible. Every single time it's used, it refers to a literal city on the Euphrates that prophecy demands is restored one day and brought back to resurgence and becomes sort of the headquarters of the Antichrist, at least for a season. Now, the question you asked is mystery Babylon.
Yeah.
Well, you'll notice in the King James Version, mystery is capitalized.
That's right.
But you read it in the NASB, and mystery is not capitalized.
Mm-hmm.
So, and one other quick thing is if people would stop looking at just verse 5 and go to verse 7, they'll see that the mystery is the woman and the beast.
That's right.
That's the mystery.
Yep.
Mystery, of course, is a new truth, something hidden, now disclosed. And the mystery is exactly how Babylon is going to be destroyed. How do the beast and the city of Babylon interact? That's the mystery. Because when you go through the Old Testament, what you'll see is two strands of prophetic thought developing. We know there's going to be some kind of Eurocentric empire under the Antichrist.
100%.
The 10 horns.
Yep.
And all of that. And we also know, you mentioned the passages this morning, Jeremiah 50 and 51, Isaiah 13 and 14. I'll throw another one in, Zechariah 5, verses 5 through 11, that Babylon is going to be restored to life. And the mystery is, how do those two different strands of prophetic thought get reconciled? That's the mystery. And so you get an explanation of that in Revelation 17, where it's the woman, Babylon, riding the beast. The beast will not like that because he wants to be worshiped above all that is called God, 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 4. And so it will actually be God putting his purpose into the heart of the beast to destroy the harlot, which is the city named Babylon. That's the mystery, okay?
Yeah.
It's when people say her title is Mystery Babylon, they're not paying attention to this information. And as you pointed out today, the word Babylon the Great is used 5 times in the book of Revelation. Never once outside of Revelation 17 is she ever called Mystery Babylon.
That's right.
She's always called Babylon the Great.
That's right.
So her title is not Mystery Babylon. So the King James Version, sorry to offend the King James only people out there, I like the King James Version, but I don't think it's inspired, the way people.
Right. Yeah.
So the King James Version has it wrong. The mystery should not be part of her title.
That's
okay.
Right.
Her title is Babylon the Great. How she interacts with the beast, that's the mystery.
Yeah.
And how God is going to put his purpose into the heart of the beast to destroy the city, that's the mystery. And by the way, when you get to the end of the chapter 17, you were in chapter 18 this morning, but backing up a chapter 17, verse 18, it's very clear. It says the woman that you saw is a city.
Yep.
So she's not just some kind of mystical religious system. She's an actual tangible city on planet Earth. Now, she could be the headquarters of a religion. No problem there. But first and foremost, she's an actual city. And so chapter 17, the mystery is how she's going to be destroyed. And chapter 18 just picks up on it and says, let me tell you about the commercial side of the same city and give some more information about her destruction. So that's a very long answer to the question.
No, it's a really good answer, and it's funny you talk about the use of the term or the deployment of the term mystery. Actually, there's the presence of a definite article depending on what apparatus you're reading out of in the Greek language, and actually it should be worded a mystery, and then there's that pause, Babylon the Great. But what's even more unique is this term mystery is this all, in my opinion, it's a very inclusive term that if you really look at it closely for what it actually implies, right? Information that would not be known unless it was actually revealed, then you begin to realize that everything you read about in all of the things that relate to Babel, the Tower of Babel, Babylon, all of that is culminated in the account of Revelation 17 in Revelation 18. And the reason why I believe that is because you can see all of the contributory variables, right? That if you were sitting in the Genesis world and you had this information revealed to you that you know in Revelation, you would be able to spot all the things, all the characteristics that you read about, whether it be the commercial side, whether it be the religious side. Like all of those things are all you can duplicate those things. It's not like it's hard to see once now that it's been revealed to us, right? And it's interesting because like when you look at the modern day movements that people are buying into, whether it be intersectionality or whether it be a lot of this stuff that's going on with the Marxism and the the stuff being funded by Soros and all that, that is all about the type of things that are going to contribute to building this city.
Yeah. You almost get the impression that there was a religious system already being built and in place.
100%.
The system is just looking for a place to be her headquarters.
Yeah.
And Bible prophecy indicates that the city of Babylon, just like the Tower of Babel, same location, which was the headquarters of what I think is called the mother-child cult.
Yeah.
Where, backing up just a little bit here, Nimrod was married to Semiramis, and the two of them had a child named Tammuz. This is kind of pieced together from Babylonian tradition, but the two of them had this child named Tammuz, and Tammuz was killed by a wild animal and brought back to life under satanic powers. And so when God confounded the language, everybody took a kind of a piece of that system into their own ethnicity and culture. That, by the way, is why God had to raise up the nation of Israel. That's what makes Israel different. She is the only nation started independently of the mother-child system because God had to take Abram and separate him. Remember, from the Ur of the Chaldeans, and tell him to walk by faith, and he would inherit a land and so forth. So the Tower of Babel was a city which was the headquarters of a system. That's exactly what's going to happen in the last days. It's just this time around, it's not going to be under the jurisdiction of Nimrod,
right?
Who's really a prefigurement of the Antichrist.
Yeah, 100%.
As you know, Nimrod's name in Hebrew means rebellion.
Yeah,
but it's going to be under an Antichrist, the Antichrist, and what Satan wanted in Genesis 11, which was disrupted by God through the confounding of the language, is brought back to life. And I think, as you pointed out today, that's after the restrainer, the handcuffs, on Satan are somewhat removed, and he can do what he wants. And he goes right back to building what he was trying to build in Genesis 11 before God, messed with his program.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things about this that's kind of scary. Like when I say scary, not to us, because we know what God is all about. We know what he's going to do for us and all that. But there's a scary parallel that exists here. And, when you start looking at the spirit of Antichrist and you start looking what that all entails, like you realize some parallels that are just unbelievable. Like things that when you stop to consider, you just think, wow, how in the world is it that this isn't just so obvious to so many people? Like you look at the Tower of Babel, and it's interesting. The one aspect that caused the Tower of Babel to become a serious problem, where the Lord looked at it and said, hey, this is going to be a problem for us. We need to get this fixed, was the fact that they had a common language. Mm-hmm. And in that common language, the Bible says it, there was nothing that could have stopped man in doing what they were seeking to do. And it's funny because we've left that world now of having confused languages. And for the first time in human history, in these last 5 years, because of AI, the whole world can speak to one another again.
Yeah. The project that was disrupted is coming back together.
Yeah.
Is essentially what's happening. And, there's so many clues in the text that demonstrate this. For example, this morning you were talking about the purple and gold.
Yep.
Which is in both chapters, by the way.
Yep.
It's in chapter 17 and chapter 18. And ever since coming of age as a Christian, I've sat under prophecy teachers. You've probably sat under the same guys, who have told us, well, this is the Roman Catholic colors in their garments. But it's very simple. All you do is go back to Daniel 5. You mentioned the passage this morning when the Persians conquered the Babylonians in 539 BC in the handwriting on the wall chapter. What was the colors that Belshazzar put around Daniel in terms of a reward, in terms of a cloak? Well, it was made of purple and gold.
Yep.
Now, that was Neo-Babylonia that did that. So purple and gold really relates to Babylon, not the Roman Catholic garb. And I'm not at all advocating Roman Catholic theology. I'm just saying that, we can say Roman Catholicism is bad without turning her into the whore of Babylon.
Yeah. It's totally true.
Yeah.
But what they do with that is Revelation chapter 17, and it talks about these 7 mountains or 7 hills. Yes. And then oftentimes people say, well, that's right there. That's Rome. That's Roman Catholicism. I actually probably got myself in trouble when I taught through Revelation 17 last week, because I actually said that it's probably more likely the 7 domains and dominionist theology than it is the 7 mountains of Rome, for a lot of reasons. I mean, look, it's like you said, we're talking about a city here. And
well, real quick on those 7 hills of Rome. I mean, just a couple of things that hardly anybody points out, but as you read it, they'll become obvious to people. It doesn't say 7 mountains.
That's right.
Or excuse me, it doesn't say 7 hills. It says 7 mountains. And the Greek there is oros. And then beyond that, when you look at it very carefully, you'll see that those 7 mountains are not even connected to the woman riding the beast.
Yep.
Named Babylon. They're connected to the beast. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3 is all you do is we take the Bible literally, except when the Bible doesn't want to be understood literally. And when it doesn't want to be understood literally, it will tell you, I don't want to be understood literally here. And it tells you right there as you move from verse 9 to verse 10 of chapter 17 that the 7 mountains are 7 kings. And remember, in this type of literature, king and kingdom are kind of synonyms. You'll see that in Daniel 2, verses 37 and 38, where Daniel says of Nebuchadnezzar, you are the head of gold. You are the king, O king, the head of gold. Then immediately he starts talking about the kingdom. So I think these 7 mountains are basically 7 anti-Semitic kingdoms that have exerted sort of a universal hatred for Israel. Egypt, Assyria, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then there's going to be sort of a revived Rome, of the last days. And remember what Daniel 7 verse 12 says. It says these beasts, when they're conquered, continue to live. So it's kind of like Rome conquered Greece politically, but Greece conquered Rome culturally.
Yeah.
In other words, they just took the Romans just took the Grecian gods and gave them new names. So apparently these beasts, their culture continued to live as we move from one empire to the next, and the amalgamation of all of them is going to be the Antichrist system. So that is the meaning of these 7 mountains. It has nothing to do with the topography of Rome, whatsoever.
Yeah, it's interesting, and there's so much to actually be said about that. Okay, so let me back up to the subject of Babylon. Today, in your opinion, knowing what we know about Babylon and seeing what we're seeing happening around us from many of the news stories that we're seeing, all of the current events, all the things that are happening, what are some things we should be looking out for? Like what as students of the Bible, studying Bible prophecy, learning the things that we're learning, what should we be looking out for? What are some things we should be seeing here?
Well, Babylon will become the center of worldwide attention at some point. Now, people say, well, that's ridiculous. There's nothing over there but a bunch of desert. Well, you know what, James? Pre-1948, they used to mock people that said Israel has to be reborn.
100%.
Well, they're not mocking anymore because look at Israel today. The same type of thing is about to happen with Babylon. Babylon is going to be restored to worldwide significance, and part of it is a 3-letter word, oil.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Just look at where most of the world's oil supply is, particularly now with our current administration, cutting back on our energy independence. We can't drill, baby, drill anymore.
Right.
So we're all dependent on the Middle East. And so all the Antichrist really has to do is set up shop in Iraq, annex a few surrounding territories, and just like that, he controls 60% of the world's oil supply.
Yeah, I would totally agree. We could spend hours and hours and hours and hours talking about the geopolitical implications as it relates just to the effects of OPEC plus. even bricks, and how it all relates to the subject of oil, and how the commoditization of oil in that region is very different than what we see in Europe, even what we see in Israel, especially because of the pipelines that exist, the ones that don't exist anymore, and a lot of the allowances that are made for the transmission of oil versus not. And Iraq is, in my opinion, of all of the nations in that region, the one that's probably primed the best for something like that, especially after Desert Storm. When Desert Storm happened under Bush Sr., they learned a lot of lessons in Iraq about how they manage their oil wells and what happens there. And things changed substantially, not to mention the fact that the permanent guardians of some of those wells are lots of members of the international community, whether it be from, the UN Security Council has some, for lack of a better term, some guardianship over some of those wells. And there's other organizations that have other guardianship. Some of it's been given to Saudi Arabia, some of it to Kuwait, some of it, under different agreements. So I think it's very primed for an international community to kind of sit down and take control of that, especially for the nations in the Persian Gulf, especially.
And one of my favorite commentators is the late Dr. Henry Morris. And most people don't know this. They just know him as a creation guy. But he was a prophecy guy too. He wrote the Genesis record, and he also wrote the Revelation record. And he says, look at his treatment of Revelation 18. He says there's no more ideal a place on planet Earth for a world capital than in Babylon, because it connects those three continents together. And then you toss in the world's oil supply, and it's just like an ideal place for the Antichrist to set up shop and, usher in world dominion. And, what's interesting is when John was taken in that non-chronological parenthetical insertion and showed that information about Babylon, ultimately by the Holy Spirit, it says he was taken into the wilderness. Guess what, James? There's no wilderness in Rome.
Yeah.
Or there's no desert area in Rome. But the desert area, wilderness desert area, fits perfectly with a description of modern day Babylon.
100%. Yeah, I would agree with you. And it's interesting too, because you look at all of the things that relate to the shipping industry. You look at all of the things related to that kind of thing. And Babylon is also a great fit for that. And we talked about this in service this morning, but we talked about just the possibility of just simply trenching out a little pathway area from the Euphrates into where the Persian Gulf is. I don't think that's a hard picture to draw.
Well, not at all. In fact, the plans are already laid for kind of a canal type thing, to go through that area and to convert that area one day to kind of a maritime city. But even if that didn't happen, and I think it will happen, it talks about the merchants of the sea standing afar off. Okay. I remember seeing pictures of Air Force One and our former president, George W. Bush. He had a screen, and he was monitoring from afar off the burning of the 10 Twin Towers on 9/11. So given our technology, it's not hard for me to imagine merchants afar off, probably in the Persian Gulf area, monitoring what has happened to their great city, Babylon, with the seventh bowl judgment.
Yeah.
Då har vi ett litet avsnitt här från Tom Nash Reports. En riktigt vaken kille, denna Nash. Och han ska titta på detta vändningen, vad som händer med Egypten just nu. Är det inte väldigt konstigt att man vänder sig mot Israel? Vad är det på gång egentligen? Tom Nash reder ut begreppen i detta klippet.
So Egypt just did the unthinkable. They have just joined the International Court of Justice lawsuit that was filed by South Africa. Now, is this the beginning of the end of the Israeli-Egyptian relationship, the long-standing, multi-decade peace agreement? Well, allow me to explain. Things in the Middle East are never, ever, ever what they seem. And this is a really good example. Now, Egypt joining this lawsuit now is the real question you should be asking yourself. Why did Egyptians wait until May of 2024 to join this lawsuit? Why not do this months ago, weeks ago? Why now? Is this because of their love for the Palestinians? What has changed now versus a week ago? Allow me to explain. Now, there's a few factors in play here. Some of them are political, some of them are PR related, and some of them are strategic. And none of them, not a shred of them, has anything to do with the Palestinians or the Palestinian issue whatsoever. So, number one, the Egyptians are watching the Israelis take the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing. Now, as I just remembered, Rafah on the Palestinian side has nothing to do with the Egyptian border. So Egypt doesn't have any claim that the Israelis are breaching the peace agreement by taking control of the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing, which, by the way, they had for years until they give it back for some reason. God knows why. So the Israelis are winning the war. They're conquering back certain land that they held before. And the Egyptians are basically losing control because since the Israelis backed out, the real control of that Rafah crossing was at Egypt's hands. Egypt controlled the Rafah crossing. And now that the Israelis are sitting on the Palestinian side, the Egyptian control has officially ended. Plus, now they got the Israelis sitting on their fence. Because next after the Rafah crossing is the Sinai Peninsula, and that's not a huge thing the Egyptians really would like to have. Losing control, getting the Israeli military on their border again. But that's about 10% of the story. 90% of the story has to do with every single item I'm about to tell right now, and none of them has to do with the Palestinians. So the other part here is that the Egyptians are playing a game of signaling with Hamas, because the Egyptians are not sure if Hamas will survive this or not. They're not sure. So they can't go all in any direction. So they're signaling to Hamas, hey, we're not part of this. We're not playing ball with the Israelis and Americans. We're absolutely on your side. So that if Hamas survives this, which may or may not be the case, Hamas is going to maintain the kind of peace agreement they have with Egypt. Egypt and Hamas basically have a deal in which they don't intervene in any of their business. The Egyptians don't help the Israelis, and Hamas doesn't help the Muslim Brotherhood to destabilize the government in Egypt, which is very fragile. This is just a sign from the Egyptians to Hamas, basically letting them know, hey guys, we still respect the deal. If you guys end up surviving this, don't start shit in Egypt. We're still good. Now, the most important reason, though, has to do with the Palestinian refugees, potentially. If Israel pushes into Rafah, there's going to be loads of refugees potentially going through the border into the Sinai Peninsula. That is a horror scenario for the Egyptians. Not because they lack land, which they have plenty of, not because they lack space, not because they hate the Palestinians. It's because there's going to be plenty of Hamas folk that are going to be embedded in those refugees. One of the main problems for the Israelis so far in the war was to distinguish which are the civilian and which is the Hamas fighter. You can't tell. It's very, very hard. So the flood of refugees that might go from Rafah into Sinai Peninsula is going to have a lot of Hamas people in them. And those Hamas people will rejoin the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, and they're going to absolutely topple this government within 5 years. Once that happens, the countdown to the death of this regime in Egypt starts. This is a no-go for them. And on top of it, there's the public perception in Egypt. Even though Egypt has a peace deal with Israel for many, many years, the Egyptian street absolutely despises the Israelis before this war started. Now they despise the Israelis even more. So the Egyptian street is absolutely anti-Israeli in the most horrible way you can imagine. They hate the Israelis. They despise the Israelis. And even though Sisi is a president for life, essentially, or until he's dethroned, a king that is popular has much, much higher chances of survival than an unpopular king. And this is just a play to show the Egyptian public that, hey, we're not playing with what Israel is doing in Gaza. Now, on top of it, over the past few days, the Egyptians absolutely closed the border from their end, preventing from aid going into Gaza. Why would they do that? If they love the Palestinians so much, if they want to help the Palestinian cause so much, why would the Egyptians potentially cause a humanitarian crisis in Gaza by closing the border now? That is because they want that crisis to happen while the Israelis are trying to take Rafah, so it will push the Israelis to basically back out, say, hey, okay, we can't do this. People are starving, they don't have any water. So the Egyptians are essentially causing a humanitarian crisis in Gaza by closing off the border And they're pushing on the political stage against the Israelis, hoping that they get to keep Rafah crossing. In the best case scenario for Egypt would be keep Rafah crossing in their control and kill Hamas. That would be the dream scenario for Egypt, because don't forget, the Egyptians and the Israelis have one common enemy, which is Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood. That's why the peace agreement between Egypt and Israel is not in any sort of jeopardy. Simply put, the Egyptians need the Israelis allies and they need the US support. This whole peace agreement is intact, not because Egypt is somehow forced into it. It's because it's in the best interest of Egypt, and that hasn't changed. So don't be fooled by this smokescreen. On the other hand, you have Hamas essentially spinning right now and using this spin in Israeli media, basically saying, hey, if you guys take Rafah, that wouldn't change anything. We're still good. So they're trying to bluff the Israelis into thinking, well, we're going to lose all these soldiers in Rafah and we're going to cause all this international mayhem over something that we don't benefit anything from. And that spin essentially has been picked up by anti-Benjamin Netanyahu opposers, I guess, in the Israeli media, who are spinning this, essentially saying, hey, we shouldn't go into Rafah because we're going to lose, essentially pushing for the end of the war at its current configuration so that they can replace Benjamin Netanyahu as prime minister. So the opposition is literally, at this point, is willing to lose the war, so that loss causes them to replace Benjamin Netanyahu. So as you can see, it's not just the US who is playing internal politics, overriding and actually overshadowing actual strategic needs. It happens everywhere. And this is another prime example. The reality is that whoever closes that gate is going to control the entire Gaza. If the Israelis get a hold of Rafah proper, they will shut down the gate. There's not going to be any smuggling of weapons. There's not going to be any movement of goods. If the Israelis sit on the Rafah crossing, they will own Gaza and they will de facto control everything. Rafah is the key to Gaza, which begs the question, why would the Israelis leave it to last and not start with it? That's a huge strategic question that I have no answer to, and it seems like a huge oversight by the Israelis. Now, there's going to be a lot of spins right now that you're going to hear in mainstream media. One of them was the Hamas spin. Oh, we agreed to a ceasefire that we have proposed and the Israelis have never seen. And that ceasefire essentially is just the surrender of the Israelis. The Israelis say no, obviously, and then the Egyptians and Hamas can say, well, the Israelis are stopping the ceasefire. Obviously, that's just designed to pressure Israel. That didn't really work and didn't catch on mainstream media. So right now, you have Hamas stalling, waiting, trying to buy time, a couple of weeks maybe, for the Israelis to get stopped by the international community. And what the US has been doing has not been helping, let's be honest. So the US is in a survival campaign right now. They're losing, this current administration is losing to Donald Trump. That's just the reality. And they know that most voters basically form their opinions around June and July, which is coming up. This is the time that people select who they're going to vote for. And that's why you're seeing this U-turn from the US going from full-on support to, hey, we're delaying weapons unless you stop this Rafah entrance. So basically, don't go into Rafah. We're going to keep supporting you. Go into Rafah. We don't know if we can support this. So this U-turn is based on US internal politics. Now, can they follow through on this? Probably not. I'll explain why. If the Biden administration goes too far with this, Trump is going to outflank them, basically saying, he's already started, by the way. He's going to say, well, you know, we wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have done this. I wouldn't have abandoned the Israelis. I wouldn't have done this. This is betrayal. So Trump is waiting on the flank. So they can only go so far with this. They can't really go full force. On top of it, you have the Jewish vote in the US, which will absolutely turn if they continue this path. And on top of it, you actually have some US dip interests in the Middle East. So this whole thing doesn't do any justice for the US strategically. And if they're going to keep doing this too hard, Trump is going to capitalize on this and actually win the election because of what they're doing. So they're in a tough spot. On top of it, we have Iran. Now, Iran has gone back to their classic way of waging war, sitting in the shadows, using Hezbollah. Well, the past few days, ever since the Israelis set foot into Rafah, Hezbollah increased significantly their attacks on the north of Israel. Now, they haven't gone full-on war. They don't want that. But they're signaling to the Israelis, hey, if you go into Rafah, we're going to turn up the heat. It's Iran's way of gently Hail Marying into the end zone, hoping something catches and they can save Hamas. When in fact, the Iranians do already understand that Hamas is lost, and they're not too upset about it. For Iran, the Shiite Iran, losing Sunni life is cheap. Sunni life is like disposable, one-time, single-use weapons they use. They think of them like drones. So Hamas will be lost. They still have the Houthi rebels. They have Hezbollah, which is actually a Shiite organization, which is the one they really want to keep and maintain and protect. No Shiite life will be lost to protect Hamas. This is the concept of Iran. They'll do a little bit to try and kind of show that they're helping, but they're not going to commit like strategic suicide to help Hamas. So over the course of the next few days, we will see how things turn up. If the Israelis keep on pushing into Rafah and they ignore all this smoke, all this noise, they will win a strategic win in this war, a key win in this war. If they surrender to the international pressure, to the US pressure, it's going to be a huge mistake, both for Israel and the Americans, that will be driven mainly by political consideration, and that will be a massive mistake.
Redan är jag, här har vi ett klipp från Puls av Israel.
Israel and the Jewish people are preparing for a very hard and emotional Memorial Day and Independence Day this year. While much of the focus is going to be on the Israelis killed either in the massacre on Simchat Torah, October 7th, 2023, or on those IDF soldiers killed in the war launched since that day, we cannot lose perspective of the process we are all experiencing. It's a process that I speak about a lot. Before I tell you what the process is, let me use President Joe Biden's recent statements and actions from last week to show you all. So last week on International Holocaust Memorial Day, President Joe Biden said this.
That hatred was brought to life on October 7th in 2023. On a sacred Jewish holiday, the terrorist group Hamas unleashed the deadliest day of the Jewish people since the Holocaust. Driven by ancient desire to wipe out the Jewish people off the face of the earth, over 1,200 innocent people, babies, parents, grandparents, slaughtered in their kibbutz, massacred at a music festival, brutally raped, mutilated, and sexually assaulted. Thousands more carrying wounds, bullets and shrapnel from the memory of that terrible day they endured. Hundreds taken hostage, including survivors of the Shoah. Now, here we are, not 75 years later, but just 7.5 months later. And people are already forgetting. They're already forgetting that Hamas unleashed this terror. It was Hamas that brutalized Israelis. It was Hamas who took and continues to hold hostages. I have not forgotten, nor have you, and we will not forget.
He was quite clear, and he received applause from the audience. That included Jews and Holocaust survivors, that Biden has not forgotten about the horrific massacre that Hamas did to us. Yet, the next day, President Biden and his administration decided to withhold weapons from Israel that our IDF need to fight the war we're in against the whole Iranian terror octopus around us, including in Gaza. And Biden said this in a CNN interview.
I made it clear that if they go into Rafah, they haven't gone into Rafah yet. If they go into Rafah, I'm not supplying the weapons that have been used historically to deal with Rafah, to deal with the cities, to deal with that problem. We're going to continue to make sure Israel is secure in terms of Iron Dome and their ability to respond to attacks like came out of the Middle East recently. But it's just wrong. We're not going to supply the weapons and the artillery shells used that have been used.
Artillery shells as well.
Yeah, artillery shells.
So it sounds to me like Biden has forgotten. Why else would he actively help Hamas by stopping Israel from being able to destroy Hamas? And the crazy thing is that Biden 2024 is going against Biden 2019. Just listen to what Biden says in this PBS interview from back then.
News this week to the extent that some of the Democrats are saying that if, because of Israel's settlements policy, that they would look at cutting off military aid to Israel as a result of that.
That'd be a tragic mistake. But the idea that we would cut off military aid to an ally, our only true ally in the entire region,
is absolutely preposterous. It's just beyond my comprehension. Anyone would do that.
And if all that Biden flip-flopping isn't enough in learning how we can't trust him, we then have this headline. Day before Biden administration announced it would withhold weapons from Israel, it issued sanctions waiver to allow arms sales to Qatar and Lebanon. Folks, Qatar is the Muslim Brotherhood and a funder of Hamas. Lebanon is basically an Iranian proxy with no difference between the Iranian Hezbollah army today and the Lebanese army. So Biden is withholding weapons from Israel and not allowing us to use them against Hamas in Gaza, but his administration will go against U.S. law, override a waiver, and sell weapons to enemies of Israel and the United States? Since the Sunni Muslim Brotherhood of Qatar and the Shiite Islamic regime of Iran both want to destroy America and Israel. So bottom line, Jews today are getting a front seat show of how God is in charge, not President Biden or the USA. If anything, I want to say thank you to President Biden and his administration for proving to the Jewish people that we can never, ever be reliant again on America like we are today. Even if Trump wins in the upcoming election, one day the Democrats will come back, more heavily influenced by the Marxist and Islamist forces growing stronger by the day within the Democrat Party. And they will be much more dangerous for Israel and the Jewish people, and we today have to start preparing for that future. From Biden's inconsistent flip-flopping, actively stopping us from doing what we have to do to defeat our enemies, and actively helping our enemies, more Jews today, especially in Israel, but also around the world, are realizing that we can only trust ourselves and turn to Hashem, God above, who is in charge, not any human being, not even the most powerful leader in the world who says he's our ally. So thank you, President Biden, for helping wake up the Jewish people in the Jewish state of Israel to now begin to work hard and fast on becoming much more independent, switching from relying on a foreign power to relying more on ourselves and our one and only true guardian, God above. So even with the pain of the massacre, the war, the captives still in Gaza, and the Jewish refugees from Israel's north and south, we cannot ignore being thankful for living in a generation where we, the Jewish people, are once again sovereign in our ancestral homeland with our own IDF army to defend ourselves. And the growing Jew hatred around the world today is the biggest proof of how the alternative of not having the state of Israel today is a defenseless Jewish people all over the world, like we were for over 2,000 years in exile. So thank God we are no longer in that situation. And for that, we have to be thankful and, yes, even celebrate Israel Independence Day as a religious holiday, which it is, thanking God above and showing our appreciation, while also holding on to the pain that we are in the process and still experiencing. Am Yisrael Chai, folks. Am Yisrael Chai. That's what you get from me, the inspiring, politically incorrect truth, belief-based about Israel, the Jewish people, and the freedom-loving world. If you are not